get started. I'm Michael O'Donnell. I'm the head of the Effectiveness and Learning team at Bond. And for those of you who don't know Bond, we're the membership organisation for international NGOs in England. So we're NGOs working on international development. We've got about 450 members who collectively spend about £3 billion every year of aid. I'd love to think we have lots of influence over that, but I can't claim that. And the members are hugely diverse, ranging from really big ones, Save the Children and Oxfam, down to really small volunteer-led organisations of a couple of tens of thousands of pounds spending per year. We do, over the last 5 years or so, we've been developing our work around organisational effectiveness, and particularly effectiveness through improving monitoring, evaluation and learning in organisations, mainly in response to kind of a demand from our members and in turn a demand from donors, challenging organisations much more about proving what they're achieving. I think those of you who've been on the training course over the last 10 days or so, I'm sure you've heard this, there's far more challenges being put out there to NGOs and others to say, not just we did this, that, or the other, and we built so many schools or we dug so many wells or something, but so what? What difference has that made? So my talk today is sort of moving away from what's frankly our usual realm of the kind of the technical aspects of doing good quality monitoring and evaluation into the sort of the enabling environment and the stuff that goes around it, and the role in particular of leaders within. I'm coming particularly from an NGO background, so that's kind of, it will be interesting to hear those of you who are from other organisations, whether some of what I'm talking about, you recognise that in your organisations. But leaders within international NGOs, CEOs, possibly director level in bigger organisations, particularly those people at the top, and also the role of donors. And I'm talking more sort of institutional donors or trusts and foundations, not your kind of person on the street giving a £10 a month kind of contribution. So, those of you on the training course, or those of you who work in M&E, you've had the training, maybe you've got the skills to do good M&E, you're really committed to the principles about learning, building on better practice, developing better practice based on your learning. So, does that mean you just get on with it in your organisations? I mean, I think we often think that that's what matters is the skills and capacity, and it's an absolutely necessary but not sufficient component to doing good M&E. I'm going to talk through why I think that is. Why do I think donors and leaders in organisations matter? Some of that is fairly obvious, but I'll talk about some of the different leadership styles in relation to monitoring, evaluation and learning that I've observed. And this is kind of personal reflection and observation, plus some reading, but this is not based on kind of scientific research. If I assessed the quality of my own evidence behind this, it probably wouldn't stand up to rigorous evaluation standards. But nonetheless, I hope it's still valid. I'll talk about whether positive leadership in relation to MEL, and I'll use that acronym, whether that can be fostered, can it be cultivated, or is it kind of just innate in people? And sort of why it matters how donor attitudes and your internal leader attitudes interact in an organisation. And hopefully you'll get some sort of practical suggestions about how you can engage on some of this. So in terms of why do your internal leaders and your donors matter, within an organisation, the CEO or senior directors contribute a number of things that affect how easy it is to do monitoring, evaluation and learning. Obviously, money. You need some budget to do it. Staff time is really key, and that's not just about the technical staff time. I have worked in organisations where I've had a great budget to do monitoring, evaluation and learning, but all the people I needed to engage within the organisation, the fundraisers, the people who were developing the project proposals, the people who were responsible for implementing the projects, weren't encouraged to engage with the MEL work at all. And so you could gather all the data you wanted in the world, but if nobody engaged with you or took the time to read it, to learn from it, to apply it, it ends up being a little bit futile. Leaders are key in making sure that everybody is on board with that. By recognition, I mean the sense of, is it appreciated when you do good monitoring, evaluation, and learning? Again, another thing I've seen in lots of organizations, and it possibly reflects the types of NGOs I've sometimes worked in, you will see sort of, not quite champagne corks popping, but almost to that level when a big new grant is won in the organization. Nobody really talks about when an evaluation shows you that the results were amazing and you've actually made a massive difference in people's lives. It's a very strange thing that and that sends signals in the organization about what people really value and appreciate. But if you get a CEO who sort of recognizes to staff that, wow, this project was amazing, it did great work, and that's, if that's done on the basis of proper, rigorous M&E, not based on just what somebody told them or sort of a very light touch kind of field visit, that's really important. And that relates to the culture as well. Is there a culture in the organization where not just success is valued, but when there is failure or just learning, are people confident in saying to the leaders, this didn't work, and something went wrong here, and we need to do better, we need to do something differently, and we need to change something? If there isn't that sort of relationship with senior leaders, you end up having kind of the information just doesn't flow to the leadership and things don't change. Similarly, accountability, and there's always a fine line between getting a culture in an organization that values learning and values improvement and has open, honest relationships, but also holds people accountable. Somebody at Difford used the phrase, you want to recognize and be happy with well-managed failure, but you do want to crack down on badly managed failure. So that means, if you tried really hard and your program didn't work because of contextual factors, or just because you were experimenting and the intervention and the environment was more complex than you thought, that's okay. You shouldn't be criticized if the project didn't achieve the targets in your log frame. But on the other hand, if you kind of messed up the management, if you never bothered reading what anybody else had written from their evaluations on the same project or the same type of intervention, if you weren't rigorous in hiring good quality staff and so on, well then yes, you should be held accountable for not doing a great job. Similarly, the leaders set the reporting demands in the organization. What are they asking for information about? Again, probably the worst case I've seen is the organization's quarterly reports to the board. I counted 14 indicators of income, not a single one about quality or progress or success of the actual programs. And that again just sends clear signals with it to staff of what's valued or not. And trying to work as a committed M&E professional within such an environment, there's only so long you can kind of keep pushing things without that broader environmental support, leadership support. On the other side, what donors give, quite similar. Obviously they give them a lot of money, and how much of that goes to M&E is very much influenced by donor attitudes. They set reporting demands. Everybody, when you sign a contract with a donor, you have to report on what they ask you to report. Some donors are, shall I name names? I may as well. Comic Relief, I think, are great in terms of they really value learning. They will sort of encourage you to not limit yourself to log frames, report on things that are interesting, report on things that matter, that seem significant. Others are very rigid about, there's only certain indicators I'm interested in, and I'm only going to give you money to report against those, and it doesn't matter whether you think they are really relevant or not so relevant to this grant, that's what you've got to report on. And those are the sort of donors where that can really constrain you when you're trying to do the M&E. Accountability, similar point, basically, accountability, recognition, and culture are all similar to the role that leaders play, but I think it's just a more indirect role that donors can play in fostering that. So, to sum it up, they kind of give cues to staff about what matters, and that has an effect on the sort of support that you get as an MD person, and the amount of actual learning that happens in organisations.